All right, let's get things started. Welcome to Defender Fridays, everyone. If you're new here, this is our casual half-hour end of the week chat about all things defense and InfoSec. No scripts, no fluff, just real conversations about security tools and best practices. I'm Christopher Luft. I'm one of the co-founders here at Lima Charlie, and today I'm joined by the fantastic Tom Cross. Tom has been working in cybersecurity since 1999. He's spoken at most of the larger conferences, been a researcher at IBM, a multiple-time founder, and frankly, just an all-around smart guy. He's got a wealth of experience in the field, and today he's here to talk to us about asymmetries in defense, why attackers often have the advantage, and how defenders can shift the balance in their favor. I think it's going to be a great discussion. Tom, maybe you can start by introducing yourself, and then we'll sort of flow into things.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So it's an honor to be the guest on this Friday. I don't know what you call this. Is this a WebEx?
Defender
We'll have a
Fridays,
Zoom chat.
fireside chat.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you. I greatly appreciate it. And this is a fun sort of format. Yeah, I mean, I've been in InfoSec for a long time. Back in the early 90s, I was, sort of ran communities within the hacker scene in the southeastern United States and ended up working at a company called Internet Security Systems that was founded in Atlanta. That was an early cybersecurity company that I saw grow from scratch. And did work with some really impressive people there on the research side. In the aughts, and we did some cool vulnerability research, and we got bought by IBM. Eventually left IBM and worked at Landcope for a while, which is now part of Cisco. So Cisco Stealth Watch, I ran the research there for a while. And then after that, I co-founded a company called Drawbridge Networks, and we built micro-segmentation software. And we sold it to a company called Opaque that did secure access service edge. And that's now part of Fortinet. So there's parts of it live on as the Fortinet Secure Access Service Edge. And since then, I've been doing a lot of contracting. I have a number of different clients that some of them are like enterprise clients, or I'm helping them with either strategy or operations. And then I've got some of them are security vendors. I'm helping them with detection engineering and things like that. Just keeping busy. And, as you said, I've spoken at a lot of conferences. One of the things, the collaboration that I've had going on for years with some friends of mine who are now at a thing called Copidian, they're all ex-West Point professors. And we kind of have an interesting collaboration because they have this sort of military doctrine background. For centuries, armies have been thinking about conflict. And what we were doing on the internet with computer security is a kind of conflict. And there's interesting sort of ways that we can learn from their hundreds of years of sort of doctrine and the lessons they've distilled that we might be able to apply to the things that we're doing. And I'm going to maybe talk about some of that in this talk. I've done there's a talk called Library of Sparta that we did at Black Hat years ago that kind of provides an overview of that topic. We did it. So Greg Conti and I did a talk at DEF CON this summer about we used some of the military doctrine around deception. So battlefield deception. We can talk about battlefield deception if you want. Sort of took it to a discussion about disinformation and how can you protect yourself against narratives on the internet, and sort of using that framework to think through that problem. In a month or so, I'm going to be at RSA at the end of April, and Greg and I are speaking again, and there we're speaking about war planning for technology companies. So if you're a company that has either you've got people or infrastructure in a part of the world that you expect may have a conflict arise.
Like Canada?
Hopefully not, man. But yeah, we could talk about this, but I do think that political or geopolitical stability seems to have been decreasing, and I'm concerned that may continue. It's like, what do people in sort of IT security functions need to do to prepare to navigate that? And unfortunately, we have a lot of things we can learn from stuff that has happened recently in Ukraine and in the Middle East. And so we're trying to distill some of those lessons and talk about, what are the things we need to think through.
Very cool. You mentioned battlefield deception. Can you maybe define that a little for us, and then how it relates to cyber?
Yeah. So if you like a famous example. So basically, that there's a lot of military conflict is not just like a matter of amassing force. It's also a matter of it's like a mind game. It has to do with convincing the other side that you're going to win, or getting them to make bad strategic decisions that you can exploit, right? And so in sort of the collection of tools that any military commander would have is thought about, sort of like concealing what their plans are from the enemy and causing the enemy to have a false model for how they think things are going to unfold. So famously, when D-Day involved some significant deception. When the Allies were going to cross the English Channel into France, they wanted to convince the Germans that they were going to arrive at a different location than the place that they actually were going to arrive in, so that the Germans massed their troops in the wrong location. And so the most obvious place to cross was Place de Calais, which is across the channel from Dover, right? It's the shortest place in the English Channel. And they did a bunch of things to convince the Germans that that's where they were going to go, including inflatable tanks that they arrayed on the coastline that looked like real tanks from the air. I was earlier, I went to ShmooCon in January. I went to the Spy Museum with my kids during that, and they have an inflatable tank at the Spy Museum in DC if you want to see one. And so the Germans bought it, and they thought that the Allies were going to land at Place de Calais, and so they landed at Normandy, and there were fewer defenders there, and that's one of the reasons they were successful. Before I explain how this relates to cyber, I want to talk about this. There's a bunch of principles of deception that sort of like military doctrine distills, which are useful for thinking about planning deceptive operations. And the most important one is this concept called Magruder's principle, which is basically that it's far easier to convince you of something that you already believe than it is to change your beliefs. So basically, if you're trying to deceive someone, it's best to reinforce their pre-existing beliefs. You're right, right? You're way more right than you thought you were. You should act on the fact that you're right, as opposed to trying to get them to change their mind, right? And so the Germans already assumed that the Allies would cross at Place de Calais. It's the easiest place to cross. And so they did a bunch of things to reinforce that assumption. And then the actual reality they presented was something different. And that principle is applicable to a whole bunch of things. It's applicable to how we get deceived by things we read on the internet, right? It's super applicable to deception in the context of cybersecurity. And so we were going to talk about asymmetries. I can talk about that, but I think we should think about protecting our networks, not just in terms of how do we protect them technically? How do I patch vulnerabilities? How do I monitor my network? But also, how do I'm in conflict with another human. There's a human being on the other end of the keyboard that's trying to screw with my network. And how can I affect how can I understand their thought processes? And how can I affect their thought processes? And I think deception relates to that. Hopefully that sort of answers your question, but I could go on and talk about asymmetries if you want.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I told you I could just sit here and talk for 30 minutes. So one of the things, asymmetry is basically this question of who has the strategic advantage in a conflict. And in InfoSec, we're constantly caught up in this idea that attackers have all the advantages, and as defenders, a lot of people, especially pen testers, have this attitude that security is stupid. You're not going to be able to defend your network against me. Why are you even trying, right? And you get that a lot if you hang out at like DEF CON and Black Hat. A lot of those people are pen testers, and their attitude is why are you on the defense side? It's dumb. Uh, and one of the things that people always say, right, is that like it's surface areas are the asymmetry. I've just got so much stuff. And the attacker only has to find one vulnerability in all of these surface areas, and I'm owned. And I've got to find them all, and I have to protect them all, and that creates this asymmetry that favors offense. And I think that it is useful to us as defenders to find ways of thinking about the problem in which the asymmetries favor the defense. How can we like engage in judo here to recast this problem in a way that we have advantages and then take advantage of those advantages? And I think the in going back to this army context, in a military context, usually we think of defenders as having the advantage in a typically in an real army situation, and that is because terrain has a lot of impact on the success of a military campaign. And when you're defending your terrain, you know it better than the attacker does, and you have the ability to sort of prepare the environment and select the ground upon which you're going to have your defense. So you have all this knowledge and all these choices you get to make in advance, and the attacker kind of has to deal with the environment, as you've represented it to them. And so typically defense is easier in a military context. When we talk about computer networks, we don't feel that way. But is it that we're not exploiting some of the natural advantages that we have? And so I can talk about a few of them. I think one of the classic ones, just to sort of like lay it out in a way that everyone will understand, is the kill chain, right? So instead of thinking about like all these different vulnerabilities in all my surface areas, I'm actually modeling the attacker's process, and I'm modeling it as a multiple step process. And then I can say for each one of these steps, I can put controls in place. And my attacker has to get through this entire process in order to succeed. And so now I have an asymmetry that benefits me as the defender. I have multiple chances to succeed, and it's the attacker that has to be perfect at each step in order to accomplish their mission, right? And it's the same problem, but I've flipped our thinking around in a way where the asymmetries favor the defense. And if I can do that, I think I can find more effective ways to protect my network. So I'll stop ranting there for a minute and let you react to that. You guys think that's
Oh,
ridiculous? What do you think?
no, I'll dive in on this. I like it. The analogy I would use, like for terrain, is your network topology. And as a defender, you have the advantage of being able to create the terrain that you want to defend. Like you can sit down and hide things behind whatever and control access in whichever way. You have the ability to define all of that. The problem is so many people don't.
Yes, that's right. Or they're not actually able to because the security team doesn't have the political ability to affect the environment to the degree that they would like, right?
Well, when I say you, I'm looking at the team writ large. I'm one of those people that defines security way beyond what the security team is because it's not. I don't like defining it just in the constraints of the security team.
Yeah, so I mean, Greg and I and some of our other collaborators did this. We were at a paper maybe 10 years ago or so where we were just sort of thinking through the Army's like terrain analysis process and applying it to a computer network. Because to your point, yeah, there's high ground in your computer network. There's like the domain controller that gets you into everything, right? There's these key locations, and then there are avenues of approach. Basically, there are ways of you can get at those things, and you can start thinking about how do I, how do I, how do I control that, to limit access? How do I architect things in a way that makes them defendable? I think the analogies, can be applied that way. So the other thing that I'm going to bring in here, back to the topic of deception, is that if I'm hack into your network, probably I got somebody to click on a phishing email or something. So I'm sitting on a laptop, right? And I got to figure out what you've got. I've got to figure out, what kind of software you're running, what kind of security stuff you've got. Is your AD on-prem or is it in the cloud? Like, you know what I mean? And so I've got to engage in, basically a process of creating a mental model of your organization. So it's not just that you get to prepare the environment you're defending in advance. It's terrain knowledge. Like, in theory, what your network is, and your attacker has to discover that. And so there's two things that you can take away from that observation, that asymmetry, right? The first is that, man, so many people don't even really know what their own environment is. Like, that's the big problem. In fact, there's this awesome Rob Joyce quote from the Usenix Enigma from like 10 years ago, where he said, you know what you think is on your network, and my Tau guys know what's actually on your network, and there's a subtle difference there, and that's how we get in, right? So understanding what you've actually got is can be a key defensive asset. But it's harder than most people. It's hard for most people to truly get there. But then the other thing is that, can I deceive the attacker as to what I've got? Can I first of all, because I know they have to go through this modeling process, can I use that to detect them? Can I detect their presence because they did something stupid that based on their expectations of what they would see, that a normal user in my network would never do. And so I'll give you a simple example of that. And it comes back to Magruder's principle. Like, what is it that they expect your network to be? Present them with that, and then be something different. Okay. So, they expect RDP to run on 3389, and you can put out a registry key change and move that to a different port. And then you could have telemetry in your network to see all of the traffic. You could collect net flow from all your routers and switches, and you could look for traffic on 3389. And if someone's doing that, they're either new here or they're not supposed to be here at all, right? And it's a simple example. It's pretty easy to configure that. It's not, but it changes your environment in a way that's going to trip up somebody that just got access to it and is expecting it to be normal. You see what I'm saying?
So it sort of seems like it's like a security by obfuscation, but it's raising the cost to the attacker, right? So in order for them to conduct that, it's not making things necessarily more secure, but you're wasting more of their time, right? Is that kind of the approach?
Yeah. So let me talk about, because you said a couple of important things there. One of the things you said is it's security by obfuscation. I'm not sure. I intend. So let me talk about that for a minute, because we used to have this, people have this mantra at InfoSec where they're like, no security through obscurity, right? And I'm like, well, I mean, ask the Army if they paint their tanks orange. They do not. They paint their tanks green. And so in the real world, obscurity can actually work. And to your point, it can raise costs to attackers. And we have a tendency in computer security to think in terms of these absolutes. It's got to be perfect or it has no value, right? And that's the attitude of the pen tester that you run into at DEF CON. Who's like, why are you defending? That's such a waste of time, right? It's the reality is that in practice, things are mushier than that. And so things that are not perfect are sometimes useful, and they're useful, yes, to your point, if they slow the attacker down, particularly if I have a foreign state actor problem. If I have a persistent threat problem, if I catch them, they're just going to come back in. And so the only thing that I can actually do here is waste the time of the human on the other end of the screen. That's the most valuable resource they have. And if I can bog them down, I'm really having an effect. And getting them to stop caring about me may be off the table if I'm an entity that has some fundamental strategic relevance to a foreign state, right? Maybe in some cases, maybe I'm a third tier thing, and if I can frustrate them, they'll go focus on another network. But it just really depends, right? So yes, waste their time. But my point is, you can detect their presence because if you are different from what they expect, they will take action based on the assumption that you are what they expect, and you will see them take that action, and that action will stand out like a sore thumb. And that's kind of, to me, like, it's like, particularly if I have sophisticated adversaries in my environment who I know can, if they want to, like, evade security controls that I have in place, like, the most important thing to me is to be cognizant of their presence, right? And it can be really hard to find them. And so I'm suggesting that, like, this general idea of being weird and then presenting something normal is a tactic that can sometimes cause people who are rooting around in your network to engage in behaviors that would be normal on anyone else's network, but are super rare on yours. And anything that's like super rare is worth investigating from a security operations standpoint. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
Yeah, I like it. Kind of draws them out, right? So it seems like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're not just just hearing, but also like maybe automated scans and things like that. That's one thing. But if you change the port and then you see that they try to infiltrate that, then you're maybe dealing with a more sophisticated adversary, and you're kind of calling them out. I like it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, obviously a thing they could do when they get there is just fire up, scanners, and that's gonna, if I have telemetry into my internal network, that's gonna light up like a Christmas tree, and I should see that, right? And I should come running. And so if I'm a sophisticated adversary, I'm not going to be stupid. I'm going to be slow and low. I'm going to take my time. When you talk to, like, really great red teamers, right? Like, they take months on a target, waiting for them to fail to patch something, waiting for a vuln to come out, waiting for them to fail to patch something, finding that window of time, where they can get in, and then once they're in, trying to appear like a normal user, trying to quickly get a cred so they can log into the VPN and be like a normal user and not have a command and control channel that they're operating over, and taking their time to discover your environment, and so they don't trip up your SOC. That's how you win at offense. And so if all of this is assuming that you're able to do the basic operational stuff, and I realize how hard it is to get to that point, right? Like, being in a place where you're patching vulnerabilities quickly and you have reasonable security operations and visibility into all the stuff that's happening in your environment, you're collecting all the logs, and you're doing some detection across the logs that you're collecting. It can be hard to just operationally get there, given the resources and just the political willingness of people to play ball. Believe me, I know. But if you get there, but I'm really interested in thinking about these situations, and I've had friends in these situations where they're at organizations that are existentially targeted by foreign state actors, and they can't. That's not going to end for them. And it's like, how do they live in that posture? How do they do something constructive, right? And it's a lot of it has to do with knowing what's up, being aware that this stuff is going on, maybe being able to tell, like, VIPs in the organization, hey guys, like, there's stuff going on right now, so you might want to be careful about what you're saying in your computer, right? We're working on trying to completely understand it, but we know that parts of it we are going to slide under the radar. You know what I mean? And that's where some of this, like, thinking, I think, is most applicable.
You mentioned the RDP trick, changing the port. Is there any other sort of real world examples that work like that?
I tend to think about, like, network security stuff, because I like spent a lot of time doing network IPS and NetFlow analytics and stuff like that. So I always think about things on the network side. And so it's like ports and protocols, right? I think there probably are interesting things you could do on the systems side, but I'm a little rustier on, like, hey, here's a suggestion, right? But it's like, thinking about it, it's like you're living off the land, right? So you own this machine, you don't want to install tools. Maybe there's some command line stuff that you want to do. I don't know how easy it is. So, like I said, the RDP thing is easy to talk about because it's a registry key. You can ship it out there and everything moves. If there's things that you can again, like, move around on the system, change the name of, that you'd expect somebody to run, And then if they run it, and again, you're getting logs off those machines, so what's getting executed. Your NDR is instrumented that. Hey, somebody ran this app, and it's not. So the problem is, what we end up with a lot is that there's these systems administration tools, like PS Exec and stuff like that. And if you're in a real complicated environment, you've got engineers using that stuff. And it's so painful because it's really hard to differentiate them from like an attack. And then, if you instrument detection, then, it can cause, so another principle of deception has to do with just sort of like, conditioning, right? So if I cry wolf over and over and over again, the next time I cry wolf, you're gonna be like, oh, whatever. If your SOC is conditioned to, people run PS exec all the time. It's the sysadmins, they're fixing something, they're not gonna like notice when it's a real problem, right? And so again, if I can somehow get my admins to do something slightly different, then if somebody comes in and does the regular thing, hey, now we pay attention, right? And so I don't know. I can't like talk to you and follow the chat at the same time. It seems like maybe people had thoughts in there, but yeah, I would definitely look for things on the system side that you can rename without breaking Windows. That particularly stuff that sysadmins do that's super sketchy potentially. That's another way to like. And I mean, obviously, there's lots of other things you can do. There are products out there that are deception products. There are honeypot products that you can get, and I like some of those things. I think that they have value. They're both at the like level of like appliances that appear to be a host on your network. That looks like something that everyone would have. That if you were an attacker, you want to poke at, but under normal circumstances, people wouldn't. But also things you can embed in HTML. So, I mean, in the last operational role I had, we had a tremendous problem with, the VPN login page getting scraped by attackers, and they would like mirror it in someplace else and send phishing emails, and this is kind of a fun place where you have an asymmetry vis-a-vis the attacker, in that the HTML that you put on your VP or your SSL VPN login is actually like a complicated surface area, and you can hide stuff in it, and they have to find it, right? And so if you can hide a little bug in there, then if they reproduce it somewhere else, you'll be aware that it's being served from another IP address, and that those kinds of things can be helpful too, right? So there's a lot of different ways to place things in your environment that are potentially like deceptive, and some of them, like I said, are productized, but they don't have to be. And a lot of the things I've talked about today are not products; they're just things you configure. What's important, I think, is understanding like like conceptually, what is the objective and how do I achieve the objective? If you put something out there that's like it's a canary, but it's really weird and there's no reason why an attacker would touch it, then it's not going to be effective. You've got to have a model of what is the attacker going to do when they get in my network, and put something right there in front of them that represents the kind of thing they would definitely look at or try, and then make sure that your organization doesn't usually do that stuff. And so, again, appear normal and actually be weird. And then because your attacker is going to assume you're just like everyone else.
Awesome. So we've got about 2 minutes left, Tom. I don't know if you have any parting words of wisdom for us. This has been a really fascinating conversation. We try and stop it hard at 11. So the floor is yours.
Oh, I mean, again, thanks everyone. I hope this was an interesting conversation. Somebody says, have I written about this? I've talked about this topic. There's a lot of related thoughts that are in the talk I did at DEF CON this summer, DEF CON 32. It's on YouTube. It is not in the context of network defense necessarily. I talk a little bit about deception in the context of malware reversing, but a lot of it is about like deception of people on the internet. But it might be interesting. And the first part of the talk, which talks about the philosophy and the maxims That's the stuff you want to understand, and then you figure out how to apply it in your environment.
Awesome.
Write the book. That's a lot of work, man. Much easier to hang out on a Zoom on Friday and just chat about it. That's much easier. I like that better. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for having me on. I hope it was an interesting discussion, and I love Lima Charlie. I love what you guys do, and you know, I'm excited to see the community that you guys are building.
Awesome. Thank you so much, sir. Take care, everybody.